Hello, I am Penny Ferguson, and this is the mark of an outstanding leader. And today I'm really delighted to be talking to Fraser Dogherty. So Fraser, welcome. It's good to see you and to have somebody of 22 sitting here telling an amazing story about leadership is a bit special. So tell us your story.
Well, it's been quite an adventure, and it all began probably 7 or 8 years ago when I was 14, and my grandmother taught me how to make jam one afternoon in the kitchen, and I started making jam as a hobby and selling it to the neighbours and at farmers markets. And I came up with some labels on the computer at home, and after a while the local newspaper wrote an article about this young guy taking his grand's jam recipes and turning them into a little business. And I found myself on page 3 of the local newspaper, which probably just meant there wasn't a lot happening in town that day. But following the excitement of being featured in the paper, I decided to leave school at 16 and I began making jam full time in my parents' tiny little kitchen. And after a while I was selling my products at farmers markets and to little shops all over Scotland, and I think at its height I was making 1,000 jars of jam a week, and my parents could barely get into the kitchen to cook their dinner. And I realised that I really had to give my parents their kitchen back at some point, and one day I would have to move production into a factory if I wanted to make any kind of business out of my jam company. And so I started by doing a lot of research, and I found out that sales of jam have been in decline for a few decades, and that's mostly because jam's very unhealthy. It's usually very high in sugar, and I suppose I just set myself the ambition of trying to come up with a healthier and more modern kind of jam. And hundreds of batches in my parents' kitchen, I came up with a way of making jam 100% from fruit. So an all natural, all fruit jam, and it became my ambition to try and get my super jam into all of the big supermarkets. And so I was then invited to attend a Waitrose Meet the Buyer Day, which I like to describe as the X factor of selling groceries to supermarkets. And I stood at the back of this queue of hundreds of people who had come up with new kinds of cakes and sauces, and I got my chance to just pitch my idea to the jam buyer of Waitrose, and he said it was a great idea and he loved the idea of trying to make jam 100% from fruit. And he was probably doubtful that I could ever set up production in a factory and create a brand and offer him a price that would be competitive. But he said that if I could do that, I'd be welcome to go back one day and maybe Waitrose would think about selling my product. And so I then spent a couple of years convincing a factory to work with me. I obviously couldn't build my own jam factory without any money or experience, but went knocking on doors of existing jam companies who mostly were pretty doubtful of a teenager who had no experience and no money, but eventually found one factory who really believed in the idea, and their business wasn't doing so great, and they figured that maybe super jam would solve some of their problems. And at the same sort of time I convinced a design agency to work with me to create the branding, and I didn't have a huge amount of money. I think I got a loan for £5,000 from the Prince's Trust, so that was all I really had to do everything. And thankfully I found a design agency that believed in the idea, and we kind of came up with this comic book idea for the branding around a sort of super jam, Superman theme, and we designed a costume that I was to wear at the lunch as this sort of jam boy character. We then kind of pitched the products to Waitrose, and unfortunately they said that this comic book idea was too silly, and they said that I would have to try something else. They said the factory I'd chosen was too expensive, and they weren't too keen on all the flavours I'd made. So basically everything that I'd just spent a year working on had to be thrown in the bin, and I started all over again, and eventually convinced a new factory to work with me, and the designers and I came up with the set of labels that are on the products today, and Waitrose agreed to give it a shot in all of their stores about 4 years ago, which was an amazing moment. And we made 50,000 jars of jam on the first day in the factory, which was really emotional to see something that I'd created being produced on a big scale. And when the products launched in Waitrose, I kind of went into the supermarket and bought the first jar on the day that it opened, and stuck the receipt up on my bedroom wall to kind of remind myself of that moment. And I think on one store in Edinburgh they sold about 1,500 jars of super jam on day one, which was more jam than they would normally sell in a month. They'd never seen anything like it. And I think it got to the point where if anybody tried to go through the checkout who hadn't bought a jar of super jam, the person sat at the checkout would ask why not. We then went into Tesco and Asda and Morrison's and well over 1,000 big supermarkets. We had a big party when we sold the millionth jar. I was invited to have dinner with Gordon Brown at Downing Street, which was quite amazing. And the products were put into the National Museum of Scotland as an example of an iconic Scottish brand. So to see myself in a museum at 19 was surreal. And my story got used as part of Orange, the mobile phone company's advertising, and probably the biggest promotion we ever did was we gave away a free jar of Super Jam to all of the 5.5 million readers of the Sun newspaper. And I think that the Sun is the biggest newspaper in the English-speaking world, and so my proudest moment was being able to share the front page of the Sun with Susan Boyle. And the products really kind of took off right from the start, and I gratefully received a few awards along the way, and one that I'm most proud of was called the Global Student Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And that was a competition where about 800 students from all around the world were asked to go and do a pitch about their business to a panel of judges in America. And most of the other students were running .com businesses and software companies, and I was there selling jam and amazingly won this award. And so I guess it's kind of been a great success along the way. And but probably the thing that I'm most proud of is having set up a charity, which I did about 2 years ago. And the background to that was that as a kid, my grandmother would always take my brother and I to visit care homes and elderly people in her area. And as kids, we didn't really understand why, but it was a bit of a chore to be dragged around all these care homes. But my gran felt strongly about it, and I just thought it would be nice to try and do something like that on a big scale. And a couple of years ago, we had our first tea party where we invited some elderly people along for scones and jam and cakes. And we've now had a couple of hundred parties. The biggest ones have had 600 people at them, and live music and dancing and scones and jam. And it's really been a great success. And thousands of people have come along and just told me how much fun they've had at the parties. So hopefully, Super Jam's gonna keep growing, and we'll launch the products in other countries and hopefully run hundreds of more tea parties.
You had a vision, and you never let go of that vision. What I really want to know is how you inspired that passion in other people, because it was your vision, wasn't theirs, but somehow you managed to inspire passion in a brand agency and in a factory when I think you said you had £5,000?
That's it.
And that was it. So there was no money and you were very young. So how did you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, you can imagine kind of going to these factories that, are 6 or 7 generations of, these 200-year-old family businesses that have been making jam, forever. And for them to even consider taking an idea from a teenager who hasn't been making jam for hundreds of years, you can imagine that they weren't too they didn't expect very much from me. And so a lot of doors were shut in my face, and a lot of factories said, this will never work, nobody's ever done it before, so you can never do it in the future. If it could have been done, somebody would have already done it. They had all of the kind of attitudes that stop any idea happening, and I could see that they weren't the most innovative companies in the world. They had been doing the same thing the same way for hundreds of years, and somehow I had to just convince them that this idea was worth a shot. And it was really, I met the right person. I met this one person in one of the factories who he was worried that the factory wasn't doing so well, and he had worked there his whole life, and I think he just really thought that the idea was worth a shot. And it was really just convincing that one person to believe in it. And he then went back to the company and said, this kid's onto something, he's got an idea, and it could save our company if we give it a shot. And in the same way at the design agency, one designer out of all of the ones I had spoken to got excited about the idea, and he just kind of thought it would be a fun project to work on a Friday afternoon, and he just thought it was worth a shot. And I guess they could see in me the passion that I had for the idea, and they could see that it was something that I was not going to give up on, and that I was going to do everything I could to make it work. And thankfully they kind of believed in me to get it into the supermarkets, and for them the payoff would come from at getting into the supermarkets, and they, I guess, believed that it would happen.
So that's really interesting, because the reason that I'm so fascinated by your story is because we're looking at leadership from quite often a very big corporation point of view. And on both of those occasions, both the brand and the factory, you're saying it was getting one person, which is kind of interesting, because when you think about an organisation that may employ 5,000 or 6,000 people, what is it, I wonder, that you think you need to do? Because there's a lot of now Generation Y people who are going to be coming into businesses, who are going to want to have a similar passion. So how the heck do you think you might start getting that thinking into a big organisation?
Well, I guess that, at Superjam, the people who are working with me, they're all my kind of age. They've got a lot of exciting things going on in their lives. They're students, some of them are musicians, some of them are even artists, and I have to kind of embrace the fact that working for me is not the most exciting thing in their life. And we aren't a generation that wants a job for life and that wants to give everything to the company that they work for. And I suppose I want to create somewhere to work that's fun, that's very flexible, that doesn't kind of micromanage people, and I don't dictate to people what hours they work, how they do their job, even necessarily what job they should do. I let them come up with their own ideas, and I guess I want to try and capture that excitement and passion that I had, when I was 15 and I had my idea. If I can get them to come up with their own idea that they feel they have ownership of, and for them to go into the department store and see a product that they designed on the shelves is an amazing feeling. And I know how powerful that was for me to kind of drive me to, at every obstacle, try and reinvent my idea and keep trying again and again. So I guess it's trying to capture that entrepreneurial spirit.
Where do you think that thinking about how you manage and lead people came from?
I've no idea really, but I guess I figure that if somebody's going to come and work for me, then they have ambitions and dreams, and everybody has some different dream. Their dream is not to come and work for a jam company their whole life and make a great career out of it. Who knows, one of them might start working next week and work for me until we grow old together, but I imagine that they want to come and work with me and learn something new. They want to just have a great experience, and hopefully it leads on to something that takes them in a direction of achieving whatever their dream is. So if I can understand what it is they're trying to do with their life, then hopefully I can help them do that. And if they feel that they're getting to where they want to go, then hopefully they'll feel motivated to do great work for the business.
When do you think it's important to find out where that person's coming from? Do you find it out before you employ them, or do you find it out after you employ them and then get to know them? How do you actually go about getting to know your people?
I don't know. If you ask somebody what's their dream, it's not necessarily something that they've written down on a piece of paper and that's set in stone. I think it's just getting a feeling of what type of person they are, and where they're trying to go. And I don't think you can just do that by just asking somebody necessarily. Mm-hmm. You get a feeling of it once you get to know them as a person, and you have a few beers together and you understand that they've got this great passion for something, and you want to help them make something of it. I forgot where I was.
Well, don't worry, I just want to see where your thinking goes if I get you to imagine stepping right out of your box. Let's say for the moment that your company grew dramatically, okay, and you ended up with an organisation where beneath you were employing 1,000 people. How do you think that you might then continue to inspire people at every level to still go along and think and feel the same way? Because you trust people, you empower them in every way possible. How do you think you might do that when it gets bigger?
Well, I think no matter what size a company is or what job people are doing in the business, I don't know what kind of business you're running if you don't trust the people that you've given a job to, and you have to let them be independent and feel ownership of something that they've created. And I think, I don't know, if you let people be independent, they will come up with ideas and they'll feel ownership of it. Whereas if they're not independent, they don't have any incentive to come up with an idea, because why would they come up with the great new idea for the company if somebody's just going to take it from them and not do anything with it, or if they do something with it, it's not their idea. They're not going to have that feeling of going into the shop and seeing something they created.
How important do you think it is that they know you personally as the top person?
I guess, yeah, in any organisation, everybody working in the company has to have a shared kind of view of where you're trying to go. They have to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and really believe in that. If they don't believe in the sort of bigger picture for the business, then it probably isn't much hope, really. And I think to help them understand where you're trying to go, the more they understand about you as a person and what your beliefs are, what you stand for, they will hopefully trust you. And if you trust them and they trust you, then hopefully you can achieve a lot.
So what I'm hearing from you is actually being very open about who you are, and not trying to say I'm the big guy who had the idea, but just all the time being open about you. I was very impressed when I met you in London that day. I think you had just got a new employee starting somewhere in Oxford Street.
That's right. And
you had helped him get going, and after the meeting you were going to go back and just to touch base and see how he was doing.
Yeah.
And the message of care that sends is kind of special.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you a couple of other things. One of the things, again, that I find really, I think exceptional would be a fair comment, is you went to see Waitrose the first time. Nothing like starting at the top, is there? I mean, you didn't go to one of the smaller ones, you went to the big one. So you go to Waitrose and they say, interesting idea, but no. Yeah. But if you do this, then we might be interested. So you do all of those things, yeah. And then you go back and they say no. Yeah. I'd really like to know first of all, how did you feel and what did you go through when you came out? What were your thought processes? And what is it that enabled you to then get your boots back on and go back and do it all again?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, there was no doubt that when Waitrose said no, I was devastated. This was something that I created. This was my baby. I loved it. I loved the design of it. I really loved the people at the factory who'd helped to make it happen, and to kind of go back to the designer and say that this idea we've had isn't going anywhere, and to say to the factory it's not going to work between us. That was pretty sad. And it was the moment where all of my family and friends and people around me said, this is where we would give up if we were doing this. We've seen you try this for a couple of years, and you've put so much energy and so much love into it, and it hasn't worked. And there's a million and one other things out there you could go and try and do, and it just doesn't seem to be getting there. But I don't know, I still somewhere inside me just believed in it, and I guess Waitrose, although they said no, they said if you try again, and if you come back with a label that looks more modern and that explains to people why they should buy the products, and if you come back with a factory that's more efficient, then we still love the idea. So I still love the idea. I still really believed in it. I think when you're trying to motivate yourself to do anything, there's not a lot you can say to yourself other than to really ask, what is it that I believe in, and do I, everybody around me said that they didn't really believe in the idea, but if I felt truly inside myself that I believed in it, then I should give it another shot. I wouldn't want to have given up and then 10 years later thought, I wonder what would have happened if I'd just tried. So I guess just inside me I still believed in the idea and was willing to give it another shot.
I think it's so interesting that somebody who has achieved what you have done is actually, in a very unconscious way, sending out some of the most powerful leadership messages possible about having a clear vision, about having passion, about holding on to the belief no matter what, and also recognising and reinforcing that quite often it's the people who are closest to you who care the most who are actually ones who then stop you, say, give up, it's going to just be too much. And yet somehow you kept going and wouldn't give up in any way. And I think it's amazing. The other thing that, of course, is very unusual, and I find it interesting that this is giving you the biggest buzz of all, is rather than saying, hey, this is lots of money, I'm just going to go and buy a yacht in the Mediterranean and I'll have a house here and a house there.
Yeah.
What you're saying is you want to give back. Tell me where that comes from.
Well, when my gran originally, was taking me to visit care homes, and, I could see that, I don't know, the impact that had on the people we were visiting, who would, maybe cry after we left. And as a 10, 11-year-old kid, you don't understand, you say, God, why are they crying? And, my gran would have to say, sometimes people cry when they're happy, kind of thing. And I guess I just felt that, for not very much money and not very much effort, really, I can have an impact on somebody that, makes their day. And I just love that. And I think the more of that I can do, the better. And it makes me happy to feel that I've given somebody that. And, I don't think there's anything I could buy that would, make me as happy as getting a letter from somebody telling me how special it was that they, made some new friends and, had a nice afternoon. But I guess I also just love the idea of, running a business that means something more than just trying to make money. I think that a business can be anything you want it to be. It doesn't just have to be, making this product and selling it and making money. I think, you can make a business, and I'm really inspired by the likes of the Body Shop and Ben and Jerry's and, companies that kind of stand for something, and that people buy a tub of ice cream, but it's something more than just a tub of ice cream, because, it stands for something, and it, I guess I just want to create a business that has meaning and that has an impact in the world, really.
So, Fraser, you were just talking about Ben & Jerry's and Body Shop. What is it about the bosses or Anita Roddick, whoever, what is it about those people that inspires you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really inspired by the likes of Anita Roddick, and, I think that when she was running the Body Shop, she made selling soap about something so much more than selling soap. Who says a soap company can't protest about animal rights or about the war or about, any issue that they feel strongly about as an organisation? And, you can imagine anybody working in the Body Shop could feel that they're doing something so much more than just putting boxes of soap on a shelf. They're part of a movement, they're trying to bring about a social change, they're, protesting, and I can imagine the excitement of being a part of that. And, I guess if you work for an organisation like Ben & Jerry's or the Body Shop or, any of those companies, you have a sense of excitement and a sense of feeling that you're part of something bigger.
It's interesting. I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder what energy could start working on. I mean, and I understand, but for you, evidently, what's really important to you is it's not just about a product. It's about an awful lot more than that. I'm kind of interested to know, if you could look around today, okay, there's a lot of leaders and some are big corporations, some evidently are not so big, but are there any people that you look at and you sort of hold up as people that you would say they are pretty outstanding leaders?
Well, yeah, there's lots of sort of famous examples, but one that I like is a guy called Tony Hsieh, who runs a company called Zappos.com, and they sell shoes on the internet in America, and they just sold the company, I think, for $1 billion to Amazon. And their whole idea was around amazing customer service, and everybody who works at Zappos has this amazing company culture where they take somebody on and they start working for the company, and I think after 2 weeks they get offered $2,000 to leave the company. And so people who love working there stay, and people who aren't that excited about it take the money and leave. So they end up with this team of people who, are just crazy about selling shoes on the internet.
Wow, never heard that. Any other examples? I like that story. If you can think of any others unusual like that. That's incredible.
I mean, yeah, there's all just like innocent and all
Yeah.
of these kind of guys, but it's not that exciting.
Is there anybody that over the years you've looked up to and you thought one day that'll be me?
No. I never sort of at any point thought, God, I really want to become that person. I just am who I am, and I believe in these things, and hopefully I can do more and more of it, and make it into a big success. And but I don't sort of have a hero as such, or
Okay.
somebody that I'm trying to be.
How important do you think it was to get the support of your parents, even if it was handing over their kitchen?
I mean, none of this would have been possible if it weren't for my parents letting me use their kitchen for years on end. And, you know, I know that a lot of parents perhaps kind of try and encourage their kids to, you know, go and study medicine or law and get a good job. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that by any means. But my parents thankfully saw the value of me doing something that I loved. And, you know, they, I think, you know, I'd sort of seen my dad be made redundant a lot throughout my growing up, and I suppose people had told him, you know, become an electronic engineer and there'll be lots of jobs doing that, and, you know, it never really happened. And I guess, you know, the lesson that he learned was that, you know, he should have stuck with what he loved, and, you know, he might have ended up in a job that he loved more, and, you know, may well have been more successful at it. And I guess they, you know, could see that there wasn't going to be much value in telling me I have to become an accountant or I have to become a lawyer, and you know, they just felt if I love jam and if I want to make jam all day, then that's a great thing that I can get up and do something that I love every day. They never imagined that it would become a success, and I don't think they imagined it was going to last as long as it has, and that it would become, you know, my life. And yeah, I'm really grateful that they let me try.
Couple of things. First thing is, do you ever get people, I mean, at the moment you've got not a huge organisation, but expanding probably pretty fast. How do you handle it when you get people who don't quite come up to scratch for some way, shape or form?
Yeah. I try to give people working with me as much freedom as possible to try out their own ideas and experiment. And of course, when you do that, you know, people will make mistakes and get things wrong. And, you know, I made a huge number of mistakes starting up Super Jam, and I think that's a good thing in some ways. You know, if people aren't making mistakes, they're not trying something new, they're not trying something that hasn't been done before, and, you know, things are going to go wrong, and that's the price you pay for coming up with something new and something great.
And finally, what's the future? Where do you see this going?
Well, yeah, I mean, Super Jam is just growing and growing, and, you know, all the supermarkets are delighted with, you know, how we're performing, and hopefully we're going to start selling the products in more countries. We're launching in Australia pretty soon, and hopefully one day in America, and just about to start selling on QVC, live on TV. So
Wow.
I'm going to kind of go in there and tell my story, and you know, hopefully all this means that we can run hundreds of more tea parties too.
Is that really what's behind all of this now? That's what you want to be doing?
I want to create a product that people love and that, you know, hopefully millions of people can enjoy. You know, I want to create a brand that's, you know, on sale around the world and that's successful, I guess. And I think that's about more than trying to make money. It's about more than just trying to sell lots of jars of jam. If I can use that to bring about some kind of social change or bring about good, and I guess if I, you know, can encourage people when I talk on in the media, if I can encourage people to go and visit Betty next door, then that, you know, that's great. So yeah, hopefully I can, you know, Super Jam will keep growing and can do a lot of good along the way.
Are you hoping to take this charity into other countries as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, wherever we're going to sell Super Jam, we'll have tea parties, and I think it's such an important part of the brand and of what I believe that it would be crazy not to.
How many young people do you feel, because it is a very different age, how many people do you think feel like you do, that whatever they do, they need to feel they're giving something back as well?
In my experience, whenever I've invited anybody to come and help at a tea party, they've jumped at the chance. I think people, given the opportunity to do something good, people do, and they give up their time, and I've been amazed at how generous people are, people my age, people of any age, and people get something back from doing something good. It makes them feel good, and yeah, I think people are very generous with their time, but you just have to give them the opportunity to.
Fraser, thank you. I think you are an extraordinarily special young man. I'm really privileged, you know. I actually feel that having got to know you, my life is richer for having met you. So very big thank you. And there we are. There's another session of an outstanding leader, and I think you'll agree, a very special young man. Thank you. Thank you, Fraser.
Thank you for having me.